The Galactic Shooting Championships had been dominated by the Zephyrians for over 3 centuries. Their 4 eyes, each capable of independent focus, made them natural marksmen that no other species could match. The crystalline beings from the Andromeda sector had won every precision shooting event since the games began. Their victories so consistent that most other species had stopped sending competitors altogether. Commander Thex 9 adjusted his ceremonial shooting vest, the blue crystals embedded in his chest catching the arena lights as he prepared for another routine victory. Around him, representatives from 47 different species filled the massive stadium on Nexus Prime. But Thex 9 knew they were all here to witness Zephyrian superiority once again. The targets floated at various distances, some as far as 2 kilometers away, others moving in complex patterns designed to challenge even the most skilled marksmen. Traditional energy weapons were prohibited in these games. Instead, competitors used projectile weapons similar to ancient firearms, a rule designed to level the playing field by removing advanced targeting computers and energy beam precision. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena in Universal Standard. "Welcome to the 847th Galactic Shooting Championships. Today we have a special treat, a new competitor from a recently discovered species called humans, representing the planet Earth in the Sol system." A ripple of curious murmurs ran through the crowd. Most had never heard of this new species, and few expected much from newcomers to galactic society. The humans had only made first contact 18 months ago and were still considered primitive by most standards. Thex 9 rotated 2 of his eyes toward the human section of the competitor area, while keeping his other 2 focused on his equipment. What he saw made his crystalline features shift into what passed for amusement among his people. A single human stood there, a bipedal creature with only 2 eyes positioned on the front of its head. The human was examining what looked like an archaic projectile weapon, running his hands along its length with obvious familiarity. The weapon itself drew more attention than its wielder. Where every other competitor carried sleek, precisely manufactured firearms provided by the tournament organizers, this human had brought his own rifle. It was a crude-looking thing, all black metal and synthetic materials with an enormous optical device mounted on top that seemed almost as long as the barrel itself. "What is that monstrosity?" asked Vex 2, Thex 9's shooting partner and fellow Zephyrian champion. His tone carried the musical quality typical of their species when expressing disdain. "Primitive technology," Thex 9 replied, his voice creating harmonious overtones. "Look at the size of that optical amplifier. Their eyes must be incredibly weak to require such massive enhancement." The human competitor seemed oblivious to the attention he was drawing. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, recently of the United States Marine Corps and now representing Earth's entire population, methodically checked his rifle's 0. The weapon was his personal M40A6, a sniper rifle he had carried through 3 combat deployments and countless training exercises. The scope mounted on top was a Schmidt & Bender 5-25x56, worth more than most people's cars and capable of precision that few beings in the galaxy could appreciate. Chen had volunteered for this assignment not out of any desire for glory, but because he genuinely enjoyed the challenge of precision shooting. When Earth's newly formed Galactic Relations Committee had asked for someone to represent humanity in the championships, he had been the natural choice. His military record spoke for itself. Over 200 confirmed kills in combat, countless competition victories, and an almost supernatural ability to place bullets exactly where he intended them to go. The qualifying round began with static targets at 500 meters. Each competitor would fire 10 rounds, with scoring based on proximity to the center of the target. It was considered a warm-up round, designed more to familiarize competitors with the range conditions than to eliminate anyone. Thex 9 stepped to his firing position with fluid grace, his 4 eyes already calculating wind patterns, atmospheric density, and gravitational variations. The Zephyrian firing stance was unlike anything most species could achieve. His crystalline body could lock into perfect rigidity while his eyes moved independently to track multiple data points simultaneously. His first shot struck the target less than 2 centimeters from center. The crowd offered polite applause, but this was exactly what everyone expected from a Zephyrian. His next 9 shots formed a tight cluster around the bullseye, each impact overlapping with the others to create a single, slightly enlarged hole. Other competitors followed, some performing admirably, others struggling with the unfamiliar weapons and conditions. The crowd grew restless as species after species failed to match Zephyrian precision. A few came close. The insectoid Mantari had excellent compound eyes that allowed for good depth perception, and the aquatic Nereidans possessed steady tentacles that made for stable shooting platforms, but none could match the crystalline precision of the defending champions. Finally, the human stepped forward. Chen shouldered his rifle with the casual ease of someone who had performed this action thousands of times. He didn't rush through his shooting sequence like some of the other competitors, nor did he take the extended time that others used for elaborate calculations. Instead, he settled into his position with methodical precision, his breathing automatically falling into the rhythm he had learned years ago in basic training. Through his scope, the target appeared enormous. The 5 to 25x magnification was set to a modest 15x for this range, turning the 500-meter target into something that appeared to be hanging just a few dozen meters away. Chen's breathing slowed as he applied the fundamentals that had been drilled into him through countless hours of training. Natural point of aim, sight alignment, breath control, trigger squeeze. His first shot surprised even him, not because it missed, but because it struck the exact center of the target with a precision that made the electronic scoring system pause for a moment before registering a perfect bullseye. The crowd's murmur grew slightly louder, though most attributed it to luck rather than skill. Chen's second shot struck less than half a millimeter from his first, creating a single, slightly elongated hole in the target face. By his fourth shot, the murmur had grown into genuine interest. By his 8th shot, the arena had fallen completely silent except for the sharp crack of his rifle. When the smoke cleared from his 10th and final shot, the electronic scoring system registered something that had never been seen in the history of the Galactic Shooting Championships. 10 shots through the same hole, with a group measurement smaller than the diameter of the projectile itself. "Impossible," Vex 2 whispered, his harmonic voice creating discordant overtones that reflected his disbelief. "The scoring system must be malfunctioning." But Thex 9 was studying the human more carefully now. He had rotated 3 of his eyes toward Chen, watching as the human calmly cleared his rifle and prepared for the next stage of competition. There was something in the human's movements that spoke of deep familiarity with violence, a casual confidence that came from repeatedly placing shots under the most stressful conditions imaginable. The second round increased the difficulty substantially. Targets were placed at 1,000 meters, and they moved in slow, predictable patterns designed to test a marksman's ability to lead a moving target. Wind flags placed at intervals along the range showed shifting conditions that would challenge even the most experienced shooters. Thex 9 had won this event for the past 47 years. His ability to track multiple data points simultaneously, wind speed at various distances, target movement patterns, atmospheric conditions, made him virtually unbeatable at calculating the complex geometry required for long-range precision shooting. He fired his sequence with his usual mechanical precision, placing each shot within a few centimeters of where he had intended. The moving targets made perfect accuracy impossible, but his group measurement was still impressive enough to draw admiring comments from the crowd. The other competitors struggled more noticeably at this distance. The increased range magnified every small error in technique, and the moving targets demanded a level of prediction that many species found challenging. Several competitors failed to hit the target face at all, their shots sailing wide as they misjudged the required lead. Chen approached the 1,000-meter line with the same methodical calm he had shown at the shorter distance. He adjusted his scope's magnification to 20x and took a few moments to study the wind flags, his eyes automatically reading the subtle signs that told him how the air was moving at different points along the bullet's path. The Marine Corps had taught him to think of long-range shooting as applied physics rather than marksmanship. Every shot was a calculation involving velocity, trajectory, wind drift, and atmospheric conditions. But more than that, it was about reading the environment and understanding how all those factors would interact over the time it took for the bullet to reach its target. His first shot at the moving target struck dead center, timing the target's movement perfectly. The second shot hit in almost exactly the same spot, demonstrating that the first had not been luck. By his fifth shot, even the Zephyrian competitors had stopped their own preparations to watch. Chen was not just hitting the moving targets, he was hitting them in exactly the same spot each time, as if they were stationary. The precision required to consistently lead a moving target by the exact same amount, compensating for wind that varied along the bullet's path, was almost incomprehensible to most of the observers. "He's not calculating," Thex9 observed, his voice carrying puzzled harmonics. "Watch his eyes. He's not running computations like we do. He's predicting." It was true. Where Zephyrians use their superior visual processing to calculate precise solutions to the shooting equation, Chen seemed to be operating on a different level entirely. He was reading the environment intuitively, his brain processing information in ways that bypassed conscious calculation and went straight to instinctive knowledge. When the second round concluded, Chen had once again achieved something unprecedented. 10 shots through effectively the same hole, but this time on moving targets at 1,000 meters. The electronic scoring system registered it as the highest score in the event's history. The arena had fallen completely silent now. What had begun as curiosity about the new species had evolved into something approaching awe. Even species that had never shown particular interest in marksmanship were leaning forward in their seats, trying to understand what they were witnessing. But it was the third and final round that would truly separate the competitors. At 2,000 meters, targets would not only move, but would also appear and disappear at random intervals. Shooters would have only seconds to acquire, aim, and fire at targets that might be visible for as little as 3 seconds before vanishing again. It was designed to simulate the kind of snapshot shooting that might be required in actual combat situations. This was where Zephyrian advantages should have been most pronounced. Their ability to track multiple moving objects while simultaneously calculating complex firing solutions made them virtually unbeatable at reactive shooting. Thex9 had never scored less than 8 hits out of 10 attempts at this stage. The crowd's attention was now focused entirely on the competition between the Zephyrian champion and the unknown human. Other competitors continued their attempts, but everyone understood that the real contest was between these two marksmen representing vastly different approaches to precision shooting. Thex9 stepped to the firing line with perhaps the first uncertainty he had felt in decades of competition. The human's performance had been so far beyond what should have been possible that it challenged his understanding of marksmanship itself. But this final round would test skills that went beyond mere precision. It would demand the kind of instantaneous target acquisition and engagement that had made Zephyrians legendary throughout the galaxy. The first target appeared at maximum range, visible for only 4 seconds before vanishing. Thex9's eyes locked onto it instantly, 3 of them calculating the firing solution, while the 4th monitored his rifle's alignment. His shot was away within 2 seconds of target appearance, striking well within the scoring ring. 9 more targets appeared over the following 10 minutes, each visible for different amounts of time and at different ranges. Thex-9's performance was flawless by any normal standard. 8 hits out of 10 attempts, with both misses being near misses that scored points even if they didn't achieve direct hits. The crowd offered enthusiastic applause for what was, by any measure, an exceptional display of marksmanship. Thex-9 had maintained his reputation and demonstrated why Zephyrians had dominated these competitions for centuries. Then Chen stepped to the firing line. The first target appeared at 1,800 meters, visible for only 3 seconds. Chen's rifle was moving before most observers had even spotted the target. His shot broke just as the target began to disappear, the bullet arriving at its destination with the kind of timing that made it seem as if he had known when and where the target would appear. Perfect center hit. The second target lasted only 2.5 seconds. Chen's shot was away in under 1 second, again striking dead center. The third target appeared at an extreme angle, requiring him to shift his entire position and reacquire a sight picture in minimal time. Another perfect hit. By the 7th target, something impossible was happening. Chen was not just hitting every target. He was hitting them all in exactly the same place relative to their center. Whether the target appeared for 2 seconds or 5, whether it was at 1,500 meters or 2,000, whether it required a dramatic position shift or appeared directly in front of him, every shot struck with identical precision. The crowd had progressed beyond silence into something approaching shock. What they were witnessing defied not just their understanding of marksmanship, but their understanding of how consciousness itself processed information. The human was reacting to targets faster than most beings could even register them, yet maintaining precision that exceeded anything they had ever seen. Thex-9 watched through all 4 eyes as Chen engaged the final 3 targets. Each shot was a demonstration of capabilities that seemed to transcend normal biological limitations. The human moved with fluid efficiency, his rifle tracking targets with mechanical precision, while his trigger finger delivered shots at exactly the right moment. When the final target disappeared and the scoring was tallied, Chen had achieved something that the mathematical models said was impossible. 10 perfect hits on targets with an average exposure time of 2.8 seconds at ranges up to 2,000 meters in variable wind conditions. The arena remained silent for a long moment as the implications sank in. This unknown species, these humans with their primitive technology and crude-looking weapons, had just delivered a performance that redefined what was possible in precision marksmanship. Chen safed his rifle and stepped back from the firing line with the same calm professionalism he had shown throughout the competition. He had not been trying to prove anything or make any statements about human capabilities. He had simply been doing what he did best, applying skills learned through years of training and combat to a challenge that happened to be presented in the form of competition rather than warfare. But for everyone else in the arena, everything had changed. The galaxy had just been introduced to humanity's particular brand of lethality, and the introduction had been delivered with precision that would be remembered for generations to come. The aftermath of Chen's victory created ripples throughout the galactic community that reached far beyond the sporting arena. Within hours of the championship's conclusion, military analysts from dozens of species were reviewing footage of the humans' performance, trying to understand the implications of what they had witnessed. Admiral Kreshvar of the Hegemony Defense Fleet was among the first to grasp the true significance of Chen's demonstration. The reptilian commander had spent centuries studying warfare across the galaxy, and he understood that precision marksmanship was far more than a sporting event. It was a direct indicator of a species' potential effectiveness in combat. "Show me the footage again," he ordered his aide, his scaled fingers tapping against his command chair in the pattern that indicated deep concern among his people. "Focus on the transition times between targets." The holographic display replayed Chen's performance in slow motion, highlighting the minimal time between target appearance and shot delivery. What the analysis revealed sent cold fear through Kreshvar's reptilian nervous system. "The human is not just accurate," he muttered to himself. "He is faster than our combat computers." The implications were staggering. Hegemony military doctrine relied heavily on the assumption that their advanced targeting systems gave them decisive advantages over less technologically advanced species. Their ships and ground forces were designed around the principle that superior sensors and computing power could overcome any disadvantage in raw capability. But Chen's performance suggested that humans might not need advanced targeting systems to achieve superior results. If they could process environmental information and deliver precise fire solutions faster than artificial intelligence systems, then every assumption about technological superiority would need to be reevaluated. The recording showed Chen engaging targets with what could only be described as supernatural timing. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed that he was beginning his target acquisition sequence before the targets were fully visible, as if he was predicting their appearance patterns rather than simply reacting to them. "Sir," his aide interjected carefully, "intelligence reports suggest this human is not even considered exceptional among his own species' military personnel. He holds the rank of staff sergeant, which indicates skilled but not elite status in their hierarchy." Kreshvar's scales shifted to the darker coloration that indicated alarm. "You mean there are more skilled humans than this one?" According to their military records, which were shared during first contact protocols, this individual's capabilities place him in approximately the top 15% of their sniper-qualified personnel. The Admiral's command chair creaked under the pressure of his suddenly tense muscles. If Chen represented merely above-average human capability, what would their elite performers be capable of? The thought kept him awake for the next several sleep cycles. Similar conversations were taking place across the galaxy as various military establishments tried to process the new information. The Zephyrians, whose military superiority had been built on their marksmanship advantages, found themselves facing the possibility that their four-eyed vision might not be the decisive advantage they had always assumed. Commander Thex 9 had not slept since the competition. His crystalline physiology didn't require rest in the same way as organic species, but the mental processes that passed for contemplation among his people had been running continuously as he tried to understand what had happened. The humans' performance violated everything the Zephyrians understood about precision shooting. Their superiority had always been based on their ability to process multiple visual inputs simultaneously, calculating complex firing solutions while maintaining perfect sight alignment. They had assumed that any species with only two eyes would be fundamentally limited in their ability to match Zephyrian accuracy. But Chen had demonstrated something that went beyond calculation entirely. He had operated on a level of intuitive understanding that bypassed the mathematical approach the Zephyrians had perfected. Where they computed firing solutions, he had simply known where to aim. Thex 9 requested access to human military records through diplomatic channels, hoping to understand the training methods that could produce such capabilities. What he discovered only deepened his concern. Human military snipers, according to the available documentation, were not selected primarily for their eyesight or their ability to perform mathematical calculations. Instead, they were chosen for psychological characteristics: patience, emotional stability, and something the humans called situational awareness, that seemed to encompass an almost mystical ability to read and predict environmental conditions. Their training focused heavily on what humans termed field craft, the ability to move unseen through hostile territory, to read terrain and weather patterns, to understand the behavior of their targets. The actual shooting was treated almost as an afterthought, something that would naturally follow from proper positioning and preparation. This approach was completely alien to Zephyrian thinking. Their marksmen trained by practicing mathematical calculations and refining their visual processing capabilities. They approached shooting as a problem to be solved through superior sensory input and computational precision. But humans seemed to treat it as an art form, relying on intuition and experience rather than calculation. Chen's performance suggested that this intuitive approach might be fundamentally more effective than the analytical methods that other species had perfected. The implications extended far beyond individual marksmanship. If humans could process combat information intuitively rather than analytically, they might possess advantages in any situation that required rapid decision-making under stress. Their military effectiveness might not be limited to precision shooting. It might extend to every aspect of warfare. 3 weeks after the championship, the first official military assessment of human capabilities was completed by a joint committee representing the galaxy's major military powers. The classified report, which would later be leaked and cause panic across a dozen sectors, painted a picture of a species whose military potential had been dramatically underestimated. The committee had analyzed every piece of available information about human warfare, from historical records provided during first contact to detailed breakdowns of their current military capabilities. What they discovered challenged every assumption about the relationship between technological advancement and military effectiveness. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history in a state of constant warfare. Unlike most galactic species, who had achieved technological advancement relatively peacefully, humans had been forced to perfect the art of killing their own kind across millennia of conflict. This had created a species whose understanding of violence was not just theoretical but instinctive. Their weapons technology was indeed primitive by galactic standards, but the analysis revealed that this might actually be an advantage rather than a weakness. Human weapons were designed to be reliable, maintainable, and effective in the hands of operators who understood them intimately. Rather than relying on advanced targeting computers or exotic energy systems, they had perfected the art of making simple systems work with devastating efficiency. The report noted that Chen's rifle, while crude-looking, represented hundreds of years of refinement in projectile weapon design. Every component had been optimized for a specific purpose, from the barrel's rifling pattern to the trigger's brake characteristics. It was a tool designed by warriors for use by warriors, and its effectiveness spoke to a depth of understanding about practical marksmanship that few species had achieved. More disturbing was the analysis of human small unit tactics. Their military doctrine emphasized adaptability, initiative, and what they called violence of action that relied on individuals making rapid decisions in chaotic situations. Unlike the highly coordinated, technology-dependent approaches favored by most galactic militaries, human tactics seemed designed to function effectively even when communications failed and command structures broke down. General Zix Alpha, the committee's chairman and one of the galaxy's most respected military strategists, summarized the findings in terms that would later become famous throughout military circles. We have been operating under the assumption that advanced technology inevitably creates military superiority. The humans suggest that this assumption may be flawed. They have achieved effectiveness through the perfection of fundamental skills, rather than the development of sophisticated systems. In many ways, they represent what we might have become if we had continued to perfect the art of warfare, rather than simply improving our tools. The report concluded with recommendations that sent shockwaves through the galactic defense establishment. Most importantly, it suggested that any military confrontation with humans should be avoided until their capabilities could be better understood. The analysis indicated that human forces, while small and technologically inferior, might be capable of inflicting casualties far out of proportion to their numerical strength. This recommendation came too late to prevent the first test of human military capabilities in actual combat. The hegemony had been conducting what they termed compliance operations in the outer spiral systems, bringing recently discovered civilizations into their sphere of influence through a combination of diplomatic pressure and military intimidation. It was a process they had perfected over centuries, using their technological superiority to convince primitive species that resistance was futile. When Earth was designated for compliance operations, the assignment was given to a standard intimidation fleet. 12 ships with crews totaling just over 3,000 personnel. Admiral Kreshvar had argued for a larger force based on the intelligence gathered from the shooting competition. But his superiors had overruled him. How much resistance could a single planet offer against the galaxy's most advanced military? The answer came when the hegemony fleet arrived in the Sol system to find it defended by a force that should have been completely outmatched. Earth's space fleet consisted of fewer than 30 vessels, most of them converted civilian craft with weapon systems that barely qualified as military hardware. The battle should have been over within hours. Hegemony doctrine called for a demonstration of superior firepower, followed by demands for surrender. Their advanced shields and energy weapons would make them effectively invulnerable to primitive human technology, while their own weapons could disable human ships without necessarily destroying them. But the humans did not respond according to any known military doctrine. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting to match the hegemony's technological capabilities, human ships scattered throughout the system in patterns that seemed random but proved to be anything but. They used their inferior weapons with the same precision that Chen had demonstrated with his rifle, targeting specific systems on hegemony vessels with an accuracy that should have been impossible given their primitive targeting systems. More importantly, they seemed to anticipate hegemony tactics with the same intuitive understanding that Chen had shown for target movement. Human captains were positioning their ships to intercept hegemony movements before those movements had been fully executed, as if they were reading their opponent's intentions rather than simply reacting to their actions. The space battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the hegemony fleet in full retreat, having lost 4 ships and suffering significant damage to 6 others. Human losses were lighter than anyone had expected. 8 ships destroyed, with the remainder of their force intact and fully operational. But it was the ground battle that truly demonstrated the implications of Chen's championship performance. Admiral Kreshvar had managed to land 2 full regiments on Earth's surface before the space battle turned against him, intending to demonstrate hegemony ground superiority while his fleet secured orbital control. The landing sites were carefully chosen to avoid major population centers. This was meant to be an intimidation operation, not a war of extermination. The human response to the ground invasion would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy as an example of how inferior forces could achieve decisive victories through superior application of fundamental military principles. Human ground forces did not attempt to match the hegemony's advanced weapons or defensive systems. Instead, they applied the same precision and intuitive understanding that Chen had shown in the shooting competition, but scaled up to battalion and company-level operations. Hegemony forces found themselves under attack from directions they had not anticipated by enemies they could not effectively locate. Human snipers, operating with the same supernatural precision that Chen had demonstrated, began systematically eliminating hegemony personnel at ranges that should have been impossible for their primitive weapons. The hegemony's advanced sensors could detect human positions, but their targeting systems could not lock onto enemies who seemed to know exactly when and where to move to avoid incoming fire. Human forces displayed the same predictive capabilities on the battlefield that Chen had shown in competition, moving out of danger before their enemies had finished acquiring targets. Within 6 hours of landing, both hegemony regiments were requesting immediate extraction. They had suffered casualties that approached 50% while inflicting minimal damage on human forces. Their technological superiority had proven meaningless against enemies who fought with a level of skill that transcended mere equipment advantages. The evacuation was completed under the cover of the retreating fleet, leaving behind equipment and casualties that would be studied by human scientists for decades to come. But more importantly, it left behind the knowledge that humanity's military capabilities had been catastrophically underestimated by the galactic community. Within weeks of the failed compliance operation, intelligence reports from across the galaxy began painting a picture of a species whose military potential seemed to defy all conventional analysis. Diplomatic contacts reported that human military personnel displayed the same characteristics that had made Chen so effective, an intuitive understanding of their profession that went beyond mere training or technological capability. The galaxy's military establishments began to understand that they were dealing with something unprecedented, a species that had evolved specifically for warfare, whose individuals could perform at levels that challenged the capabilities of advanced artificial intelligence systems. And somewhere on Earth, Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen continued his regular training routine, unaware that his performance in a simple shooting competition had altered the balance of power across the entire galaxy. 6 months after the hegemony's failed compliance operation, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy equilibrium. No major power was willing to directly challenge humanity, but neither were they prepared to accept humans as equals in galactic affairs. The result was a Cold War that played out in diplomatic chambers and intelligence networks across dozens of systems. Chen had been promoted to Gunnery Sergeant and assigned to Earth's newly formed Galactic Defense Corps, a joint military organization tasked with protecting human interests as they navigated their integration into galactic society. His shooting demonstration had made him something of a celebrity, though he remained largely unaware of his fame beyond Earth's atmosphere. The shooting range at Fort Campbell had been expanded and modernized to accommodate the flood of galactic observers who wanted to study human marksmanship techniques. On any given day, representatives from a dozen species could be found watching human soldiers train, trying to understand the principles that made them so effective. Chen was working with a group of new recruits when the alert came through. Priority Alpha communications from Earth Defense Command meant only one thing. Immediate military action was required somewhere in the galaxy. The briefing was conducted in the secure conference room beneath the base's main headquarters. General Patricia Hayes, the newly appointed commander of the Galactic Defense Corps, stood before a holographic display showing a star system Chen didn't recognize. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," General Hayes began. "The Corvani system is under siege by what intelligence believes to be a consortium of species attempting to test human resolve. They've taken hostages, approximately 200 human civilians from the mining colony on Corvani 3, and they're demanding that Earth withdraw from all galactic affairs." The hologram shifted to show tactical details of the system. 3 different alien fleets had positioned themselves around the planet, their combined forces representing overwhelming firepower compared to anything humanity could project at such distances. "The hostage-takers have made one specific demand," General Hayes continued. "They want to settle this through what they call trial by champions. Each side will select their finest marksmen for a competition similar to the Galactic Championships. The winners take control of the system and the hostages." Chen felt a familiar tightness in his stomach. He had experienced the same sensation before every combat deployment, a mixture of anticipation and dread that came with knowing he was about to be asked to do something dangerous. "They've specifically requested that Earth send the human who won the galactic competition," the general said, her eyes finding Chen's. "Gunnery Sergeant Chen, they want you." The journey to the Corvani system aboard the UES Determination took 12 days, during which Chen learned more about galactic politics than he had ever wanted to know. The consortium holding the hostages represented 3 different species, each with their own reasons for wanting to test human capabilities under controlled conditions. The Veltar were silicon-based life forms who viewed warfare as an art form. Their society was built around the concept of honorable combat, and they believed that any species claiming military superiority should be able to prove it through individual achievement. They had provided the idea for trial by champions. The Nexari were aggressive expansionists who had been thwarted by the hegemony's retreat from human space. They wanted to demonstrate that human success against the hegemony had been a fluke, that properly prepared forces could easily defeat the primitive newcomers. The third species, the Kethvar, were motivated by simple fear. They had observed the footage from Chen's championship performance and the subsequent military actions, and they wanted to understand human capabilities before humans became a direct threat to their own territories. Together, they had assembled what they believed to be the three finest marksmen in the galaxy, each representing the pinnacle of their species' capabilities. The contest would be held on a neutral planet, with representatives from dozens of species observing to ensure fairness. Captain Sarah Morrison, the Determination's commanding officer, briefed Chen on the tactical situation as they approached the contest site. "Intelligence suggests this is about more than just the hostages," she explained. "Half the galaxy is watching this contest. How you perform will determine how humanity is treated in galactic affairs for generations to come." Chen understood the implications, but he also understood something that the aliens might not have considered. They were treating this as a test of human military capabilities, but Chen viewed it as just another day at work. He had been shooting competitively and operationally for over 15 years. Pressure was something he had learned to ignore. The contest site was a planet called Neutral 7, a barren world maintained by the Galactic Council specifically for resolving disputes between species. The shooting range had been constructed to galactic standards, with targets at distances up to 5 kilometers and environmental conditions that could be adjusted to test marksmen under various atmospheric conditions. Chen's first glimpse of his opponents told him everything he needed to know about the challenge ahead. The Veltar champion was a creature called Shard Singer, whose crystalline body was similar to the Zephyrians, but larger and more angular. His 4 arms could each hold a separate weapon, allowing him to engage multiple targets simultaneously. His reputation throughout the galaxy was legendary. He had never lost a formal combat, and his precision with energy weapons was considered supernatural, even by Veltar standards. The Nexari representative was General Gorfang, a massive reptilian whose scales had been replaced with cybernetic implants that enhanced his reflexes and targeting capabilities. Half of his original body had been replaced with military-grade hardware designed specifically for combat. His augmented nervous system could process information faster than most organic brains, and his mechanical limbs never trembled or wavered. The Kethvar had sent someone called the Perfect Calculator, a being whose entire existence was dedicated to mathematical precision. His species had evolved beyond the need for traditional bodies, existing as pure intellect housed in mechanical shells. The Perfect Calculator's targeting systems were rumored to be more accurate than the guidance computers on planetary defense systems. Chen observed his opponents during the pre-contest briefings and felt the same calm that had settled over him before every important shot of his career. These beings were impressive by any standard, but they were also trying to solve a problem that Chen had stopped thinking of as a problem years ago. They were focused on the technical aspects of marksmanship, the calculations, the equipment optimization, the precise measurement of environmental factors. Chen had learned to trust his instincts and let his training take over. The difference in approaches would prove decisive. The contest format was similar to the Galactic Championships, but with significantly higher stakes. 3 stages of increasing difficulty, with the winner being determined by overall performance rather than individual stage victories. The final stage would be conducted under combat conditions, with targets that shot back using energy weapons set to cause severe but non-lethal injuries. Stage 1 was precision shooting at 2,000 meters under artificially variable atmospheric conditions. The planet's weather control systems would create shifting wind patterns, pressure changes, and gravitational fluctuations designed to challenge even the most sophisticated targeting systems. Schardzinger fired first, his forearms allowing him to engage multiple targets simultaneously, while his crystalline senses tracked environmental changes in real time. His performance was flawless by any normal standard. 10 hits out of 10 attempts, with group measurements that would have won most competitions. General Gorfang's cybernetic enhancements allowed him to process environmental data faster than organic consciousness could follow. His shots were delivered with mechanical precision, each one calculated to compensate for the exact atmospheric conditions at the moment of firing. Another perfect score, with groups even tighter than Schardzinger's. The perfect calculator approached the problem as pure mathematics, his artificial mind running thousands of calculations per second to account for every variable factor. His shots seemed to defy the environmental conditions entirely, striking their targets as if the wind and pressure changes were irrelevant. Then Chen stepped to the firing line. He had watched his opponent's approaches with professional interest, noting their reliance on calculation and technological assistance. Each of them was trying to solve the shooting equation through superior data processing, treating the environmental challenges as problems to be overcome through more accurate measurement. Chen took a different approach entirely. Instead of fighting the environmental conditions, he read them like a language he had been speaking his entire adult life. The shifting winds were not obstacles to be calculated around. They were information sources that told him exactly where to aim. His first shot struck the target before most observers had realized he had finished his aiming sequence. The second shot followed so quickly that some spectators assumed he was firing fully automatic. By his fifth shot, the alien observers had fallen silent. Chen was not calculating wind drift or atmospheric pressure changes. He was reading them intuitively, adjusting his aim based on sensory inputs that bypassed conscious thought entirely. Where his opponents were using technology to solve mathematical problems, Chen was using skills that had been developed through thousands of hours of practice under real-world conditions. His 10 shots created a single hole in the target that was smaller than the projectile diameter. The measurement computers registered it as the most precise shooting they had ever recorded under variable atmospheric conditions. Stage 2 introduced moving targets at extreme ranges up to 3,500 meters, with unpredictable movement patterns designed to simulate combat conditions. The targets would appear for random durations between 1 and 5 seconds, following paths that defied prediction through mathematical analysis. This was where the aliens expected their technological advantages to prove decisive. Schardzinger's multiple arms and independent target tracking, Gorfang's enhanced reflexes, and the perfect calculator's computational speed should have given them insurmountable advantages over a human relying on primitive biological responses. But Chen's approach to the problem was fundamentally different from theirs. Where they were trying to predict target movement through calculation, he was reading the movement patterns like a hunter reading the behavior of prey. His brain processed the visual information at a level below conscious thought, recognizing patterns and predicting changes without the delay imposed by mathematical analysis. The result was devastating. Chen engaged targets that his opponents couldn't even acquire, placing shots with timing so precise that it seemed like he was controlling the targets rather than tracking them. His 10 shots at Stage 2 resulted in 10 perfect hits on targets that most marksmen would have considered impossible. The alien observers were no longer discussing Chen's performance in terms of marksmanship technique. They were trying to understand how organic consciousness could process information faster and more accurately than their most advanced artificial intelligence systems. But it was Stage 3 that would truly demonstrate the difference between human and alien approaches to warfare. The final stage simulated actual combat conditions. targets would fire back using energy weapons calibrated to cause pain and temporary incapacitation without permanent injury. Competitors would need to engage multiple threats while under direct fire, making precision shots while experiencing the psychological pressure of being shot at. This was where Chen's real advantages became apparent. His opponents were all skilled marksmen, but they were not experienced combat soldiers. Their training had focused on the technical aspects of shooting rather than the psychological challenges of maintaining precision under fire. They approached the problem as an extension of their previous successes, assuming that superior calculation or technological enhancement would overcome the stress of combat. Chen had spent years learning to shoot while people were trying to kill him. The moment the combat simulation began, he transformed from a competition shooter into a combat soldier. His movement patterns changed from methodical precision to fluid aggression. His target engagement shifted from careful calculation to instinctive violence. Shardsinger's multiple arms became a liability when energy bolts began striking his crystalline body, causing him to lose coordination between his various weapon systems. Gorfang's cybernetic enhancements actually slowed his responses as his artificial systems tried to process the chaos of combat through rigid programming protocols. The perfect calculator's mathematical approach collapsed entirely when faced with the unpredictable nature of a firefight. His artificial consciousness could not adapt to situations that defied calculation, leaving him paralyzed by an inability to compute optimal solutions to problems that had no optimal solutions. Chen moved through the combat course like water flowing around obstacles, engaging targets with a fluidity that seemed to defy the constraints of human physiology. He was not calculating optimal firing positions or computing target engagement sequences. He was reacting to threats and opportunities with reflexes that had been honed through years of actual combat. His shots came from positions that his opponents couldn't predict, at times when they weren't expecting engagement, targeting weak points that he identified through combat experience rather than technical analysis. Within minutes, he had eliminated every target in the simulation while taking only minor hits from return fire. The contest was over, but its implications were just beginning. Chen's victory had been observed by representatives from 47 different species, many of whom were military commanders tasked with assessing human capabilities. What they had witnessed challenged every assumption about the relationship between technology and military effectiveness. The humans had demonstrated that their individual soldiers could outperform the galaxy's most advanced military hardware when it came to the fundamental task of applied violence. If this performance could be scaled up to unit level, then human military forces might be capable of achieving decisive victories against opponents who possessed overwhelming technological advantages. More importantly, the contest had revealed that human military effectiveness was based on principles that other species could not easily copy. Chen's performance was not the result of superior equipment or advanced training techniques. It was the product of fundamental differences in how humans processed information and responded to threats. The psychological impact of Chen's victory extended far beyond military considerations. For the first time since achieving faster-than-light travel, the galaxy's established powers were confronting a species that might be inherently superior at the one activity that ultimately determined political relationships between civilizations: warfare. The hostages were released within hours of Chen's victory, and the consortium fleet withdrew from the Corvani system without further incident. But the larger implications of the contest would influence galactic politics for decades to come. Humanity had proven that it belonged among the galaxy's major powers, and it had done so through the simple expedient of demonstrating that some things could not be improved through technology alone. Sometimes, evolution and experience were more valuable than computation and engineering. Chen returned to Earth with little fanfare, resuming his training duties at Fort Campbell as if nothing had changed. But across the galaxy, Military academies were beginning to study human tactical principles, and weapons designers were trying to understand how primitive technology could achieve superior results in the hands of properly trained operators. The age of human expansion into galactic affairs had begun, and it had started with a simple demonstration that accuracy mattered more than sophistication, that instinct could triumph over calculation, and that sometimes the most advanced solution to a problem was to perfect the fundamentals rather than develop more complex systems. The galaxy was learning that humans had spent millennia becoming very, very good at killing things precisely, and that lesson would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come.